Welcome back to the Wasteland. You found this frequency, so you're ready for the truth. This is the full story of Caesar's Legion, the faction everyone hates, the slavers in football gear who turned 87 tribes into an empire of suffering. You've heard the myths, but you haven't heard this. The massacre at Nipton, where they decided fates with lottery tickets. The burned man who survived being set on fire and thrown into the Grand Canyon. The systematic erasure of entire cultures. The women reduced to breeding stock. The children raised as weapons. The crosses lining every highway as warnings. This is the confessional you weren't supposed to hear. The truth about how one educated man named Edward Sallow read books about ancient Rome and decided to become Caesar, building a slave army that would threaten the entire Mojave. This is about what happens when someone smart and ruthless decides the ends justify any means, when cruelty becomes policy, when atrocity becomes routine. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I need to tell you something before it's too late. Before the crosses come for me too. Before they drag me to the center of whatever town they decide deserves their attention next. My name doesn't matter anymore. Names stop mattering the moment you see what I've seen. The moment you understand what Caesar's Legion really is. You've heard the stories, haven't you? The whispers that travel through the Mojave like radiation on the wind. Tales of men in football gear and skirts, carrying machetes, speaking a dead language. Raiders pretending to be Romans. Savages playing dress-up. That's what people say when they're trying to sleep at night. That's the lie they tell themselves because the truth is so much worse. The truth is that Caesar's Legion isn't pretending at all. They believe every single word of it. And that belief has consumed 87 tribes. 87 different peoples who used to have names, cultures, histories. Gone. Erased. Absorbed into something that shouldn't exist. I was there in the beginning. Not at the very start, but close enough. Close enough to see Edward Sallow become Caesar. Close enough to watch a follower of the apocalypse transform into a god. You want to know how it happened? You want to understand how one man with books about ancient Rome could build an empire of slaves and suffering? Then listen. Listen close, because I'm going to tell you exactly how the most hated faction in the Wasteland came to be. It started in 2247. That's the year everything changed. Edward Sallow wasn't supposed to be a conqueror. He was supposed to be a scholar. A member of the followers of the apocalypse, sent east with Joshua Graham and a few others to study tribal dialects around the Grand Canyon. Simple mission, academic work, the kind of thing that's supposed to help people, not destroy them. But Sallow was never like the other followers. He was smarter, yes, brilliant even, but he was also angry, bitter. He thought the followers were weak, thought their mission to educate and enlighten was naive. He wanted action, he wanted power. And when the Blackfoot tribe captured their expedition, he saw his chance. The Blackfoot were losing a war. 7 other tribes were crushing them. They took Sallow and his group hostage, probably for ransom, probably out of desperation. Most people in that situation would have tried to escape or negotiate their release. Edward Sallow taught them how to kill. He found books on his journey, books about Julius Caesar, books about the Roman Empire, military tactics, conquest, total war, and he used those books to turn a dying tribe into a weapon. He showed them how to maintain their firearms properly, how to manufacture ammunition, how to make explosives, how to fight as organized units instead of scattered raiders. He gave them the tools they needed to win. And they did win. The Ridges were first. Weakest tribe, easiest target. Classic divide and conquer strategy, straight from the Roman playbook. When the Ridges refused to surrender, Sallow didn't hesitate. He ordered the Blackfoot to kill every single person. Men, women, children, no exceptions. No mercy. Just piles of corpses left rotting in the desert sun. That was the lesson. That was the message Sallow wanted to send. This wasn't tribal warfare anymore. This wasn't raids for supplies or territorial disputes. This was total warfare. Complete annihilation. The kind of brutality the tribes had never encountered before. The Kaibabs were next. When their envoy refused to surrender, Sallow took him to see what remained of the Ridges, showed him the bodies, made him understand what resistance meant. The Kaibabs surrendered immediately. Then the Fredonians, then all the others. One by one, tribe after tribe. Some surrendered, some fought and died. But in the end, they all became part of something new, something monstrous. Sallow crowned himself Caesar, not as a joke, not as a title, as an identity. He stripped away every tribal name, every cultural marker, every piece of history that made these people who they were. He replaced it all with a single uniform identity. The Legion, one great tribe built on the bones of all the others. And he made Joshua Graham his first legate. his right hand, his military commander. Together, they built an army that would terrify the wasteland for decades. But here's what you need to understand. Caesar didn't just build an army, he built a religion. He told his followers he was the son of Mars. The god of war himself had chosen Caesar to cleanse the world in nuclear fire and rebuild it in his image. The tribes believed him. Why wouldn't they? He'd taken them from defeat to victory. He'd given them purpose and discipline and power. They worshipped him. They obeyed him without question, even unto death, and anyone who questioned the cult of Mars found themselves crucified or executed. Faith enforced through terror, devotion maintained through blood. The conquests continued, year after year, tribe after tribe. The legion grew. Caesar's methods never changed: offer surrender or face extinction. Those who surrendered had their cultures destroyed, their identities erased, their young men conscripted into the legion, their women turned into slaves and breeding stock. Those who resisted were slaughtered to the last child. No middle ground, no negotiation, just submission or death. And with each victory, the legion became stronger, more disciplined, more fanatical. The twisted hairs thought they were safe. They served as scouts for the legion during the conquest of Arizona. They helped Caesar expand his territory. They were allies, partners, but Caesar doesn't have partners. He has tools, and when a tool is no longer useful, or when it might threaten his absolute control, he discards it. The legion invaded the twisted hairs and forcibly assimilated them. The ones who resisted ended up crucified along Interstate 40, their bodies left as warnings, as decorations, as proof that even loyalty means nothing if Caesar decides you're expendable. By 2277, Caesar's legion controlled Arizona and New Mexico. They had footholds in Colorado and Utah. 86 tribes had been conquered, assimilated, or exterminated. The legion wasn't just an army anymore. It was a machine, a massive slave army built on ruthless utilitarian principles. Every person existed only to serve the state. Individual life had no value beyond utility. Men were conscripted as soldiers or slaves. Women were breeding stock. Children were taken from their families at birth and raised to know nothing but the legion. No personal freedom, no individual rights, just endless service to Caesar's vision. The training was brutal, physical conditioning on par with NCR Rangers. Legionaries learned to run faster, fight harder, endure more pain than any other fighters in the Wasteland. They developed resistance to pain through constant combat and torture, hand-to-hand fighting with melee weapons until their bodies were covered in scars. Mental conditioning that removed all capacity for independent thought. They didn't question orders. They didn't hesitate. They didn't feel compassion or doubt or fear. Just pure discipline enforced through decades of reconditioning. You could order a unit of legionaries to cut their own throats, and they would do it without hesitation. That's not loyalty. That's not dedication. That's the complete destruction of human will and the slavery. God, the slavery. It fueled everything. The legion's economy, their logistics, their expansion. Slaves performed all the labor while the soldiers fought. Slaves built the camps. Slaves maintained the weapons. Slaves served the needs of their masters in every possible way. The legion took slavery and made it systematic, industrial, efficient. They marked their slaves with red crosses on their chests or slave collars around their necks. They enforced laws of honesty, industry, and prudence through whipping and torture. They worked their slaves until they collapsed and then replaced them with fresh ones from the next conquered tribe. Women had it worst of all. The legion's misogyny wasn't just cultural prejudice, it was policy, official doctrine. Women were forbidden from combat roles, forbidden from positions of leadership, forbidden from working alongside men in jobs of esteem. Their only value was biological, breeding stock to produce the next generation of legionaries. Caesar believed more children meant a stronger legion, so he mandated child quotas for his soldiers to meet. Women were assigned to men by Caesar or his legates, traded, distributed, treated as property. Even female members of conquered tribes who might have been warriors or leaders in their old lives were reduced to breeding slaves in the legion. The cruelty was the point. The degradation was intentional. It all served Caesar's vision of a totalitarian empire where only he had value and everyone else was disposable. But Caesar wanted more than just Arizona and New Mexico. He needed his Carthage and his Rome. He needed a grand adversary worthy of his military genius. He needed a capital worthy of a Caesar. And he found both in the Mojave. The new California Republic became his Carthage, a democracy he could wage war against, proving the superiority of his autocratic dictatorship. And New Vegas, powered by Hoover Dam, became his Rome, the city he would conquer and transform into the heart of his empire. Finally, he told his followers, the Legion would stop being a nomadic army and become a standing military force, a true empire. Not just conquerors, but rulers. Not just destroyers, but builders. At least that was the plan. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to know if I'm the only one who feels this way. The first Battle of Hoover Dam came in 2277. Joshua Graham led the Legion's forces across the Colorado River. Caesar's Malpais legate, the burned man, the greatest military commander the Legion had ever produced. He was supposed to crush the NCR, supposed to take the dam and open the path to Vegas, supposed to cement Caesar's place in history as a conqueror equal to the ancient Romans he worshipped. But Chief Hanlon and General Oliver had other plans. They let the Legion advance, let them think they were winning, let them push deep into NCR territory around Boulder City, and then they detonated the explosives they'd packed into every building. The structures became giant fragmentation bombs, killed and maimed most of the legionaries, left the survivors in shock. The NCR counterattacked and the Legion broke, fled back across the Colorado. Their worst defeat in Legion history, the invincible army had been stopped cold. Caesar's response was immediate and brutal. Failure would not be tolerated. Not even from his most trusted commander. Not even from his first legate. Not even from the man who'd been with him since the beginning. Joshua Graham was brought before Caesar in shame. The Legion gathered to watch, to learn, to understand what happens when you disappoint the son of Mars. The Praetorian Guard covered Graham in pitch, set him on fire, and threw him into the Grand Canyon. That should have been the end of Joshua Graham. No one survives a fall like that. No one survives being burned alive and then thrown thousands of feet down into a canyon. But Joshua Graham wasn't like other men. He woke up the next day, burned, broken, skin charred and twisted, but alive. He crawled out of the northern edge of the Grand Canyon and began walking home to New Canaan. 3 months, 400 miles. Every day changing his bandages and feeling like he was being burned alive all over again. Every day the pain threatening to kill him. But he kept going. And when he finally reached New Canaan, his people welcomed him like a prodigal son. 30 years of separation and atrocity didn't matter. He was home. But the legend of the burned man didn't die in that canyon. It spread. Legionaries whispered about the man who survived Caesar's judgment. Tribes told stories about the Malpais legate who refused to stay dead. Caesar forbade anyone from speaking Graham's name, which only made the myth stronger. The burned man became something more than human in the minds of the Wasteland. A ghost, a warning, proof that even Caesar's power had limits. Caesar replaced Graham with Legate Lanius, the monster of the East. A man whose reputation was built entirely on violence and terror. Stories said Lanius single-handedly killed multiple Legion patrols before Caesar recruited him. That he led his tribe, the Hydebarks, the 67th tribe conquered by the Legion, with such ferocity that even Caesar took notice. 14 tribes laid down their arms at his feet. 5 more were rendered extinct by his campaigns. When you saw Lanius on the battlefield, the stories claimed your doom arrived with him. But here's the thing about Lanius. Nobody knows if the stories are true. If you kill him and take his helmet, there's not a single scar on his face. Not one mark from all those supposed battles. Did Caesar invent the legend? Did he create a boogeyman to replace the burned man? Or was Lanius really that dangerous? It doesn't matter. The Legion believed the stories, and belief is all Caesar ever needed. By 2281, 4 years after the disaster at Hoover Dam, the Legion had rebuilt. 87 tribes now, one more than before the defeat. Caesar never stopped expanding, never stopped conquering, never stopped erasing cultures and identities in his march toward Vegas. The Legion controlled massive territory east of the Colorado River, the entire states of Arizona and New Mexico, parts of Colorado and Utah. Cities existed in Legion territory, though nothing compared to New Vegas. Caesar had built something that shouldn't exist in the Wasteland. An actual empire, harsh, brutal, totalitarian, but functional. And that functionality came at a price measured in crucifixions and slavery and the complete destruction of human freedom. The second push for Hoover Dam was different, more careful, more strategic. Caesar learned from his failure. He wouldn't just throw his legion at the dam and hope for victory through superior numbers and discipline. This time he would plan. This time he would eliminate every variable. This time he would use subterfuge and assassination and terror to weaken the NCR before the final battle. He had a list. A long list. Mr. House needed to die. President Kimball needed to die. The Brotherhood of Steel needed to be destroyed. The Boomers needed to be neutralized or allied. The Great Khans needed to be recruited. The White Glove Society needed to be compromised. Every piece carefully moved into position. Every threat eliminated before the Legion crossed the river again. But there was a problem. A brain tumor. Caesar, the son of Mars, the god emperor of the Legion, was dying. Slowly, painfully. The headaches were getting worse. His ability to command day-to-day operations was slipping. He needed treatment, real medical care. But the Legion forbade advanced medicine, viewed it as weakness, viewed painkillers and surgical intervention as signs of degeneracy. The same philosophy that made legionaries tough also meant their leader was suffering from a treatable condition with no way to treat it. The irony was lost on Caesar. He just kept planning, kept scheming, kept believing he could will himself to victory through pure force of personality. But you can't intimidate a tumor. You can't crucify a brain hemorrhage. Death doesn't care about your philosophy or your empire or your dreams of being the next Julius Caesar. The Mojave campaign showed everyone what the Legion was really capable of. Not just in battle, but in terror, in making examples, in sending messages written in blood and fire. Camp Searchlight was irradiated by Legion sabotage. The entire base turned into a radioactive hellhole filled with feral ghouls. Ranger Station Charlie was overrun and destroyed. Nelson was conquered, its NCR soldiers crucified along the main road as decorations, as warnings, as proof that resistance was futile. And then came Nipton. God help us, then came Nipton. Nipton was a small town, neutral territory, the kind of place that served everyone as long as they paid. NCR soldiers, powder gangers, even Legion Frumentari in disguise. The mayor, Joseph B. Stein, was greedy, saw opportunity in the chaos. When the powder gangers escaped from the NCR correctional facility, Stein invited them to Nipton, offered them services, prostitutes, chems, entertainment, and he invited NCR soldiers too, kept the two groups separated, took money from both sides, played them against each other while filling his pockets. It was working until Vulpes Inculta arrived. Vulpes came disguised as Mr. Fox, approached Stein with a business proposition. The Legion would pay 8,000 caps if Stein helped them trap both the powder gangers and the NCR soldiers in Nipton. Stein agreed immediately. Greed made him stupid, made him think he could make a deal with the Legion and walk away with caps in his pocket and no consequences. He didn't understand what he was inviting into his town. He didn't understand that Vulpes Inculta never intended to honor any deal. The trap wasn't just for the powder gangers and NCR soldiers. It was for everyone. The Legion swept into Nipton in October 2281, caught everyone by surprise, herded the entire population to the center of town. Powder gangers, NCR soldiers, Nipton residents, everyone. Some tried to fight. You can find the bodies of dead legionaries in Nipton if you look. Evidence that resistance happened even if it ultimately failed. But most people went peacefully, hoped they could negotiate, hoped they could buy their way out, hoped the Legion would take what they wanted and leave. They didn't understand. The Legion doesn't take what it wants and leave. The Legion makes examples, sends messages, creates theater from suffering. Vulpes Inculta addressed the gathered crowd, told them their sins, told them about disloyalty, told them that when legionaries are disloyal, some are punished while others are made to watch. Then he introduced them to the lottery. Everyone would draw a ticket. The ticket would determine their fate. It wasn't random mercy. It was systematic terror, a game where the prizes were different types of death and suffering, the ultimate demonstration that your life meant nothing, that your fate was decided by chance and cruelty in equal measure. The lucky losers went first. They drew tickets that earned them decapitation. Quick deaths, mercy by Legion standards. Their heads came off and their suffering ended in seconds. That was the best outcome anyone could hope for in Nipton that day. Then came the crucifixions. That's where most of the tickets led. Up on crosses, nails through hands and feet. Left to die slowly under the desert sun. Dehydration, exposure, pain beyond description. Some of them lasted days, screaming, begging, dying in full view of anyone who passed by on the road. The Legion wanted people to see, wanted the message to spread, wanted everyone in the Mojave to know what happened to towns that served all comers without loyalty to Caesar. Mayor Stein got special treatment. When his ticket was drawn, the Legion didn't just kill him. They burned him alive on a pile of tires, made him scream, made him suffer for his greed, made everyone watch what happens when you think you can profit from playing both sides. The smoke from his pyre rose black and thick into the sky, visible for miles, a beacon of cruelty, a monument to Legion justice. Third-place winners were enslaved, taken away to Legion camps, stripped of their names and identities, collared, marked, worked until they collapsed and then worked some more. Maybe they lived longer than the ones who were crucified. Maybe prolonged suffering was worse than quick death. The Legion didn't care. Slaves were tools, useful until they broke and then replaced. Second place went to a powderganger named Boxcars. They spared his life but crippled his legs with hammers, shattered the bones, left him in agony, unable to walk, unable to escape, just lying there in the ruins of Nipton with his ruined legs and his memories of everyone who died around him. He called himself lucky, said he won second place in the lottery, but nothing about what happened to Boxcars was lucky. It was torture dressed up as mercy, a reminder that sometimes surviving is worse than dying. First place went to Oliver Swanwick, another powderganger. They let him go, completely unharmed, walked away from Nipton celebrating, screaming about winning the lottery, about being free, about being chosen. He survived purely by chance, pure random luck, and his survival made the horror worse somehow, proved that the Legion's cruelty was arbitrary, that they could spare you or crucify you based on nothing but which ticket you drew, that your life had so little value it could be decided by lottery. Swanwick ran through the wasteland shouting about his victory, while behind him Nipton burned and the crucified screamed and died. After the lottery ended, the Legion set fires throughout Nipton, gathered bodies and flammable junk and created pyres. The smoke rose into the sky like a signal, like a warning, like a promise of what was coming for the rest of the Mojave. They left rabid mongrels in the town hall as traps for anyone who investigated. They crucified powdergangers along the road. They scattered lottery tickets throughout the ruins like confetti, like souvenirs, like proof that what happened in Nipton was entertainment for the Legion, a show, a demonstration, a message written in suffering and delivered with systematic efficiency. Vulpes Coulter waited in the town hall after the massacre, waited to tell anyone who came what had happened and why. He explained that Nipton was wicked, debased, corrupt, that it served all comers without loyalty, that it was a town of whores, that the lottery was justice, punishment for sin, a cleansing. He said the people of Nipton didn't resist because they only cared about themselves, claimed they watched their families die without fighting back. But the dead legionaries and the weapons found near Nipton residents told a different story. People fought, people resisted. They just lost, overwhelmed by trained soldiers who made warfare their entire existence. The Legion left Nipton as a monument, a warning, a preview of what was coming for the NCR. This wasn't tribal raiding. This wasn't raiders looking for supplies. This was systematic terror designed to break the will to resist before the battle even started. And it worked. Word of the Nipton Massacre spread throughout the Mojave. People were terrified. The NCR was terrified. Even the most hardened wastelanders looked at Nipton and understood that Caesar's Legion was something different, something worse than any threat they'd faced before. If you've ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. But here's what nobody talks about: the contradiction at the heart of everything Caesar built. He claimed to be recreating the Roman Empire, claimed to be following in the footsteps of Julius Caesar and bringing civilization to the wasteland. But the real Roman Empire didn't work like the Legion. Real Rome let conquered peoples keep their identities, let them maintain their cultures and traditions as long as they paid taxes and didn't rebel. That's how Rome held so much territory for so long, by being smart about assimilation, by understanding that you can't rule an empire if everyone hates you and is waiting for the first sign of weakness to revolt. Caesar's Legion did the opposite, forced total cultural annihilation, erased every identity, eliminated every tradition, created a monolithic culture that depended entirely on military might and Caesar's personal authority. The resentment was building. You could see it in Legion members like Ulysses, whose tribe was erased. You could hear it in the whispers among slaves who remembered their old lives. You could feel it in the fact that the Legion had to maintain constant brutal discipline, because the moment they showed weakness, the whole structure would collapse. Caesar built an empire on sand, on fear, on the willingness to commit atrocities that kept everyone too terrified to resist. But fear only lasts as long as the fearmaker is strong, and Caesar was dying. The brain tumor wasn't just a medical problem, it was an existential threat to everything the Legion represented. Caesar was the Legion, his personality, his vision, his will. Without him, what was left? Legate Lanius was a brutal military commander, but he wasn't a thinker, wasn't a philosopher, wasn't capable of the political maneuvering and long-term planning that built the Legion in the first place. If Caesar died, the Legion would fragment, would devolve into warring tribes again, would become exactly what it claimed to have transcended. All those conquered peoples would remember who they used to be, all that resentment would explode. All the brutality and slavery and cultural erasure would come back as vengeance. The Legion would eat itself alive, and that's the secret nobody wants to admit. The brutal truth that makes Caesar's Legion the most hated faction in the Wasteland. It's not just the slavery. It's not just the crucifixions. It's not just the systematic misogyny, or the cultural genocide, or the mountains of corpses left in their wake. It's that all of that suffering, all of that cruelty, all of those destroyed lives and erased cultures serve no purpose beyond maintaining Caesar's ego. He built an empire that can't survive without him, created a society so dependent on his personal authority that his death guarantees its collapse. Every slave, every crucified victim, every woman reduced to breeding stock, every tribe erased from existence suffered for nothing. For a dream that was doomed from the start, the philosophy behind it all is just as hollow. Caesar talks about Hegelian dialectics, about thesis and antithesis creating synthesis. He claims the NCR is the thesis, corrupt democracy doomed to fail. The Legion is the antithesis, brutal autocracy focused on survival and stability. And when he conquers Vegas and merges them, the synthesis will be something stronger than either. A new society that combines NCR's infrastructure and civilian institutions with the Legion's military strength and discipline. A totalitarian nationalist empire that will bring true civilization to the Wasteland. Pax Romana for the post-apocalyptic world, but it's nonsense. Intellectual window dressing on simple conquest. Caesar read philosophy books as a follower and used them to justify what he was always going to do anyway. Take power, build an army, conquer everyone who opposed him. The dialectic is just the excuse, just the story he tells himself and his officers to make it sound like there's a grand plan instead of just endless violence in service of his ambition. And even if his synthesis theory was sound, it requires him to be alive and in control to implement it. Requires his genius to balance the contradictions and force the merger. Without Caesar, there is no synthesis. Just the Legion devouring the NCR or fragmenting into warlord territories. Just more suffering and chaos and proof that Caesar's grand vision was always a lie. The Legion's lands tell a different story than their propaganda. Yes, traders report that Legion territory is safe, that caravans can travel without fear of raiders, that the roads are secure and trade flows freely. Rose of Sharon Cassidy admits it grudgingly. The Legion guarantees absolute protection for merchants. No bandits, no robbery, no chaos. Just order enforced through terror. But that safety comes at a cost. The cost of living in a police state where stepping out of line means crucifixion, where women have no rights, where children are taken from their families and raised as soldiers or slaves, where any hint of independent thought or cultural identity is crushed, where you're safe from raiders because you're already enslaved to something worse. The civilians in Legion territory don't live in Rome. They live in a tribute system where they exist to support the army. They farm, they manufacture, they provide resources and bodies for the military machine. The trappings of Roman culture that the Legion uses, the Latin words and the military ranks and the symbols, those are only for the soldiers. The subject populations don't get the culture. They just get the oppression, get to be conquered peoples feeding an army that will conquer more peoples, who will feed the army that will conquer more peoples. Endless expansion because the Legion has no other purpose, no endgame beyond conquest. No plan for what happens when they run out of tribes to absorb and enemies to crucify. Even the Legion's vaunted discipline and military effectiveness has a dark side. Yes, legionaries are fast and strong and fearless. Yes, they're trained to a level that rivals the best NCR rangers. Yes, they can close distances with frightening speed and fight with melee weapons effectively even against opponents with guns. But that effectiveness comes from breaking them as humans, from reconditioning them so thoroughly that they can't think for themselves, can't question orders, can't feel empathy or doubt or anything that might make them hesitate. They're not soldiers, they're weapons shaped like men, tools that Caesar points at his enemies until the tools break. And then he makes new tools from the next batch of conquered children. The decimation ritual shows how little individual legionaries matter. When a unit fails, when a commander leads his men to defeat, the Legion doesn't just punish the commander. They beat him to death in front of his troops. Then the new commander invokes decimation. Every 10th legionary in the failed unit is selected and beaten to death by his comrades. Not for any individual failure, not for cowardice or desertion or disobedience, just for being part of a unit that failed. 1 in 10 dies as punishment and warning, as reminder that failure is unacceptable, and the Legion will sacrifice its own to maintain discipline. And the legionaries who do the beating, who kill their brothers in arms on command, do it without hesitation. without question. Because that's what the conditioning does. It removes everything human and replaces it with absolute obedience. The medical restrictions hurt the Legion more than they help. Caesar believes medicine and painkillers are signs of weakness, that embracing pain builds character and toughness. So the Legion forbids advanced medical treatment, relies on healing powder and battlefield surgery, and mostly just letting wounded soldiers die if they're too broken to fight. It's supposed to make them harder, supposed to weed out the weak, but it also means preventable deaths, treatable injuries becoming fatal, infections spreading, because proper medicine is considered degeneracy. Caesar himself suffers from this philosophy. His brain tumor could be treated, could be removed by someone with medical knowledge and equipment, but he can't seek that help without admitting that his philosophy is flawed, without showing weakness, without revealing that the son of Mars is just a man with a medical condition. So he suffers, and plans, and hopes he lives long enough to see Vegas fall. The hypocrisy extends further. Caesar uses technology when it suits him. The Legion employs guns and explosives and radios. They use whatever weapons they capture or manufacture, but they present themselves as rejecting the corruption of the old world, as building something pure and new, as transcending the failures of pre-war civilization. Yet their entire structure depends on Caesar's education, on books he read as a follower, on knowledge preserved from before the bombs fell, on philosophical concepts and historical examples from the very civilization he claims to have moved beyond. Caesar is a fraud, an educated man pretending to be a prophet, using the ignorance of his followers to maintain his god-emperor status. And his greatest fear, greater even than military defeat, is being exposed. Having someone reveal to the Legion that Caesar is really Edward Sallow, that the son of Mars is the son of a raider victim, that the culture he claims Mars dictated to him came from dusty books about ancient Rome. Most legionaries don't know the truth, don't know that Caesar invented their culture, don't know about the followers of the apocalypse or Edward Sallow, or how a scholar became a warlord. They believe the mythology, believe Caesar is divine, believe Mars chose him and gave him the knowledge to conquer the Wasteland and build a new civilization. The higher ranking officers know some of the truth, know Caesar is human, know the culture is borrowed, but they keep the secret because the myth is useful, because faith makes legionaries fight harder, makes them die willingly, makes them commit atrocities without hesitation. The Legion runs on lies and blood in equal measure. Joshua Graham knew all the secrets, was there from the beginning, helped build the Legion from a captured follower expedition and one desperate tribe, translated for Caesar, trained the first legionaries, became the Malpais legate and led the conquest of Arizona. And that's why Caesar wanted him dead even after the burning, even after the fall into the Grand Canyon, even after forbidding anyone to speak his name, because Graham was a loose end, a witness, someone who could expose Edward Sallow as a fraud, someone who could tell the Legion that their god-emperor was just a man who read books and got lucky. Caesar sent Frumentari to hunt Graham, sent the Whitelegs to destroy New Canaan, ordered his former friend and co-founder killed because the truth Graham carried was more dangerous than any NCR army. But Graham survived. Against all odds, against every assassination attempt. Rangers and snipers reported killing him 5 times before the first battle of Hoover Dam. 5 confirmed kills and Graham kept showing up alive elsewhere. Maybe he used doubles. Maybe he was just that hard to kill. After the burning, after crawling out of the Grand Canyon and walking 400 miles with ruined flesh, Graham became something beyond human in the minds of the Wasteland. The burned man, a legend, a ghost, a warning that Caesar's power had limits. That execution by the son of Mars wasn't final. That rebellion was possible. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The Whitelegs failed to kill Graham, failed to eradicate New Canaan completely, scattered the survivors into Zion Canyon, where Graham rallied the Dead Horses tribe as their war chief, where he fought to protect what remained of his people, where he tried to atone for 30 years of atrocities committed in Caesar's name. The legend of the burned man only grew, became more powerful, became a symbol that even the Legion's most loyal commanders could fall and rise again, could reject Caesar and survive, could fight back. That's what Caesar fears most. Not the NCR, not the Brotherhood of Steel, not House or the Boomers or any external threat. He fears his own creation turning against him, fears the legionaries learning the truth and abandoning the faith, fears the slaves rising up, fears the conquered tribes remembering who they were and taking vengeance for what was done to them. The entire legion is a house of cards held together by Caesar's will and the myth of his divinity. Pull out either support and everything collapses, and Caesar knows it. Knows that his empire is fragile despite its appearance of strength. Knows that every crucifixion and every decimation and every brutal display of power is necessary because the moment he shows weakness, the moment the faith cracks, everything ends. The legion's conquest of 87 tribes wasn't glorious. Wasn't civilization defeating chaos, it was systematic cultural genocide. 87 different peoples who had languages and traditions and histories and identities. Gone, erased, forgotten except as numbers in Caesar's tally of victories. The twisted hairs, the Hydebarks, the Kaibabs, the Ridgers, dozens more whose names nobody remembers because the legion made sure they couldn't be remembered. Made sure that being absorbed into the legion meant ceasing to exist as anything other than bodies in red skirts carrying machetes and speaking broken Latin. And for what? What did all that destruction accomplish? Caesar talks about stability and order and long-term survival, but legion territory isn't stable. It's pacified through fear. The order is maintained through constant vigilance and brutal punishment. The survival depends entirely on military strength and the willingness to commit any atrocity to maintain control. The moment the legion weakens, the moment they lose battles or Caesar dies or the military machine falters, everything they built falls apart. The subject peoples revolt, the slaves escape. The legionaries fragment into warlords fighting over the ruins. All the death and slavery and suffering was for nothing. Was for Caesar's ego and his dream of being remembered as a great conqueror. Was for one man's ambition dressed up as philosophy and justified with lies about bringing civilization to the wasteland. The women suffer most and longest. The legion's treatment of women isn't just cruel. It's systematic dehumanization enforced as policy. Women can't fight, can't lead, can't work in positions of respect. They exist to breed, to produce children, to serve as property distributed by Caesar or his legates to reward loyal soldiers. Premenopausal women are breeding stock. Postmenopausal women, and those too weak for childbearing, are laborers. Slaves for tasks deemed too degrading even for male slaves. The legion views this as natural, as proper order, as the way things should be, because women are weaker and their only real value is biological. The misogyny runs so deep that even asking about it gets you explanations about how child quotas strengthen the legion, about how more births mean more soldiers in 20 years, about how women should be grateful for the protection of legion territory, even as that protection comes from enslaving them. The children born into legion slavery never had a choice, never knew anything but the legion's way. Boys taken at birth or at 10 years old, depending on circumstances, separated from their mothers, raised in training camps where they learned to kill and obey and nothing else. No education beyond warfare, no skills beyond violence, no identity beyond being legion property. They grew up thinking this was normal, thinking Caesar was a god, thinking slavery and crucifixion and conquest were the natural order of things. The conditioning started so early and ran so deep that by the time they were old enough to question it, they couldn't. The capacity for independent thought had been beaten out of them, replaced with doctrine and discipline and absolute faith in Caesar's vision. The girls had it different, but no better. Raised by slave mothers to be slave wives, taught that their value was in childbearing and service, that questioning male authority was sin, that their bodies belonged to whoever Caesar assigned them to. Generation after generation of women raised to accept their own subjugation, raised to teach the next generation to accept it too. The legion didn't just enslave women, it tried to make slavery hereditary, tried to create a permanent underclass that would reproduce itself without resistance, because resistance had been bred out over generations. It was slavery as a self-perpetuating system, slavery as culture, slavery as the only reality children knew. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The thing that made me finally decide to leave this testimony. The legion was winning, not militarily, not yet, but ideologically. They'd convinced themselves that what they were doing was right, was necessary, was the only way to bring order to chaos. Caesar's officers believed in the mission, believed that individual suffering didn't matter compared to collective survival, believed that democracy was weakness and autocracy was strength, believed that the wasteland needed a strong hand to unite it, even if that hand was drenched in blood. They'd taken Caesar's lies and made them truth through sheer repetition and violence, made atrocity into policy, made cruelty into virtue. The merchants who traded with the legion convinced themselves it was different, that the safety of legion roads justified the horror, that you could do business with slavers and crucifiers and still maintain your humanity. that their caps weren't covered in blood because they didn't personally nail anyone to crosses. They pretended not to see the slaves, pretended the women weren't property, pretended the crosses lining the highways were just part of the landscape, just the cost of doing business in Caesar's territory. And by pretending, by treating the legion as legitimate, they made it legitimate, made it normal, made it acceptable. Some wastelanders looked at the legion and saw strength where they should have seen brittleness, saw order where they should have seen oppression, saw civilization where they should have seen systematic dehumanization. They compared legion territory to raider-infested areas and decided the legion was better, safer, more stable. They ignored that the safety came from enslaving everyone, that the stability came from crushing all dissent, that the order came from removing every shred of human freedom. They saw the surface and missed the rot underneath. Missed that building peace on slavery and terror isn't building peace at all. It's building a powder keg that will eventually explode. The NCR wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. Corrupt politicians, inefficient bureaucracy, troops spread too thin, supply lines stretched to breaking. But at least the NCR tried to build something real, tried to create a society where people had rights, where democracy, however flawed, gave citizens a voice, where the government was supposed to serve the people instead of the people serving the state. The NCR had problems that could be fixed without burning everything down. The Legion had problems baked into its foundation, had problems that were features, not bugs, had problems that couldn't be fixed because Caesar designed them into the system deliberately. That's the fundamental difference. The NCR failed to live up to its ideals sometimes. The Legion succeeded in living up to its ideals, and those ideals were monstrous. The NCR's corruption was politicians taking bribes and supply officers skimming resources. The Legion's purity was ordering children killed and women enslaved and entire cultures erased. The NCR's inefficiency meant some people didn't get help they needed. The Legion's efficiency meant atrocities were committed on schedule and with perfect organization. I'll take flawed democracy over functional tyranny every single time. Caesar's brain tumor was justice in a way, poetic justice. The man who forbade medicine dying from a treatable medical condition. The God Emperor reduced to a suffering mortal by biology he couldn't intimidate or conquer or crucify. His grand plans threatened by something microscopic growing in his skull. All his philosophy and all his legions and all his territory couldn't save him from his own body, betraying him. And he knew it. Knew he might die before conquering Vegas. Knew his legacy might be nothing but 87 erased tribes in a slave army that would fragment without his leadership. Knew that everything he built might collapse into nothing within years of his death. That's what makes Caesar's Legion the most hated faction. Not just what they did, but what they represented. The triumph of cruelty over compassion. The victory of the strong over everyone else. The idea that suffering is justified if it serves the state. The belief that individuals are disposable and only the collective matters, with one man defining what the collective needs. They represented the worst impulses of humanity dressed up as civilization. Violence presented as order, slavery marketed as stability, genocide sold as unification, and enough people believed it, or pretended to believe it, or convinced themselves it didn't matter as long as the roads were safe, that the Legion grew and prospered, and threatened to consume the entire wasteland. I've seen what the Legion does to people, not just the obvious victims, the ones who end up on crosses or in chains. I've seen what it does to the legionaries themselves. Boys turned into weapons, men turned into fanatics, human beings reduced to tools that wear out and get replaced. They don't smile, don't laugh, don't have friends or hobbies or dreams beyond serving Caesar. They exist in a state of constant discipline and training and readiness for battle. And when they die, and they all die eventually because that's what Caesar made them for, they die believing they served Mars, die thinking their death had meaning, die as slaves convinced they were free because Caesar told them their slavery was purpose. The officers aren't much better. They have more autonomy, more authority, more knowledge, but they're trapped too, trapped by their investment in the system, trapped by the blood on their hands, trapped by the knowledge that if the Legion falls, they fall with it. They can't leave, can't defect, can't question, because they know too much and did too much, and the only path forward is more conquest and more cruelty, and hoping Caesar's plan somehow works before everything collapses. They're prisoners of their own atrocities, bound by chains made of crucified victims and erased cultures and decades of systematic evil. And Caesar himself, he's the biggest prisoner of all, imprisoned by his own myth. He can't show weakness, can't admit mistakes, can't acknowledge that his philosophy might be flawed or his methods might be wrong. He has to be the son of Mars every moment of every day, has to maintain the illusion of divine authority even as his brain literally destroys itself, has to keep planning and conquering and building his empire even though he knows it probably won't survive him. He built a cage around himself made of lies and expectations and the needs of the system he created. And now he can't escape any more than the lowliest slave can escape. The second battle of Hoover Dam, whenever it comes, will decide everything. If the Legion wins, if they take the dam and Vegas, Caesar gets his Rome, gets to attempt his synthesis of NCR and Legion, gets to prove his philosophy can create something lasting. But I don't think it will work. I think even if the Legion wins the battle, they'll lose the war. Because you can't build civilization on slavery and terror, can't create lasting stability through conquest and cultural erasure, can't make people loyal by destroying everything they are and replacing it with fear. The conquered peoples will remember, the slaves will resist, the brutality that won battles will make governing impossible. And when Caesar dies, and he will die, the whole structure will come crashing down. If the Legion loses, it's even clearer. They retreat back east, lose momentum, lose faith, start questioning whether Caesar really is the son of Mars if Mars lets them lose. The cracks widen. The subject populations see weakness and revolt. The legionaries fragment into factions. The 87 tribes that were never fully broken remember their names and take them back. The Legion doesn't fade away peacefully. It tears itself apart, devolves into exactly the kind of tribal warfare Caesar claimed he was ending, proves that his entire project was built on sand. Either way, the Legion is doomed. That's the brutal truth. That's what makes them the most hated faction in all of Fallout. Not just because they're cruel, though they are. Not just because they're slavers, though they enslave thousands. Not just because they commit atrocities, though their atrocities are legendary. But because all of it, every crucifixion and every erased culture and every enslaved woman and every child soldier, all of it was for nothing. For a dream that couldn't work. For a system that couldn't last. For one man's ego and his desire to be remembered as a great conqueror. Caesar wanted to be like Julius Caesar, wanted to build an empire that would last for centuries, wanted to bring Pax Romana to the Wasteland, but he forgot the most important part of the story. Julius Caesar was assassinated, stabbed to death by his own senators because autocracy breeds resentment and absolute power, makes everyone around you a potential threat. The Roman Empire that followed was built by Augustus, not Julius, built through careful diplomacy and political maneuvering and allowing some measure of freedom and identity to conquered peoples. The empire that lasted was the one that learned from Julius Caesar's mistakes. Edward Sallow learned all the wrong lessons, copied the conquest without understanding the governance, adopted the brutality without recognizing it as a tool that needed to be put away once the fighting stopped, built an army when he needed to build a nation. The Mojave will remember Caesar's legion long after it's gone. We'll remember the crosses and the slavery and the Nipton lottery. We'll remember the 87 tribes that ceased to exist. We'll remember the burned man who survived Caesar's judgment. We'll remember that the most disciplined, most organized, most effective military force in the Wasteland was also the cruelest, the most evil, the most deserving of hatred and resistance and ultimate defeat. Future generations will look back at Caesar's legion and ask how it happened, how one educated man with books about Rome could build an empire of suffering, how thousands of people could be convinced to commit atrocities in the name of order, how the Wasteland came so close to submitting to tyranny dressed up as civilization. And maybe, if I'm lucky, someone will find this testimony, will hear my warning, will understand that safety bought with slavery isn't safety. That order maintained through terror isn't order. That civilization built on erasing cultures and enslaving peoples isn't civilization. It's just barbarism with better organization, just cruelty with Latin names, just evil that learned to march in formation and quote philosophy while nailing people to crosses. Caesar's legion is the most hated faction because they deserve to be hated, because every person with a shred of humanity looks at what they built and recoils, recognizes it for what it is, refuses to make excuses or rationalize or pretend the roads being safe justifies anything. The legion is what happens when someone smart and charismatic and ruthless decides that the ends justify any means, when someone convinces themselves that individual suffering doesn't matter, when someone builds a system designed to perpetuate itself through violence and calls it peace. I'm tired now, tired of remembering, tired of carrying these stories, tired of knowing what I know and being unable to forget. But I needed to tell you, needed to make sure someone understood what Caesar's legion really was beneath the propaganda and the Latin words and the claims of bringing civilization. Needed to leave this warning before they come for me, because they will come. The Legion always comes for those who speak truth about them, always silences those who expose their lies, always makes examples of anyone who might give others ideas about resistance. So, now you know. Now you understand the brutal truth behind Fallout's most hated faction. Caesar's Legion was 87 erased cultures, thousands of enslaved women, generations of children raised as weapons, countless victims crucified along the highways as warnings. A system built entirely on suffering and maintained through terror. An empire that couldn't last beyond its founder because it was never designed to last. It was designed to conquer, to expand, to consume everything in its path until there was nothing left to conquer and then collapse into itself. That's the legacy. That's the truth. That's why we hate them, because they showed us what humanity is capable of when it abandons compassion, when it embraces cruelty as virtue, when it decides that some people matter and everyone else is expendable. The Legion was the Wasteland's warning, the proof that surviving the apocalypse wasn't enough, that we had to decide what kind of world we wanted to rebuild. And Caesar's answer, his vision of the future, was one where freedom died and slavery lived and suffering was the price of order. I choose to reject that vision, choose to believe that we can do better, have to do better, because if the Legion represents our future, if that's the best we can manage, then maybe the bombs should have finished the job. Maybe humanity doesn't deserve a second chance if this is what we do with it. But I don't believe that, can't believe that, won't believe that. There has to be another way, a better way, a way that doesn't require crucifying our humanity to save our lives. The crosses are still standing in Legion territory. The slaves are still in chains. The women are still treated as property. The children are still being raised as weapons. And somewhere in his tent at Fortification Hill, Caesar sits with his dying brain and his failing empire and his dreams of conquest that will never come true. The brutal truth remains brutal. The hated faction remains hated, and the Wasteland waits to see if we learned anything from the nightmare that was Caesar's Legion. This is my testimony, my warning, my confession that I saw and I knew and I did nothing until it was too late. Learn from my failure. Learn from Caesar's Legion. Learn that safety bought with blood and maintained through terror isn't safety at all. It's just a slower death, a death of everything that makes us human. And that price is too high. Always was. Always will be. The Legion is coming. Or maybe they're already defeated. Time will tell, but their legacy will remain, a scar on the Wasteland's memory, a reminder of what we must never become again. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the warning is all I can leave behind. Maybe that's all any of us can do when faced with evil that wears civilization's mask. Speak the truth. Refuse the lies. Remember the victims. And never, ever let the crosses become normal.